right, everybody, I think welcome to the session on digital health data access management and use. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we'll go ahead and kick off. I do want to note that I do have the chat window up next to the presentation, so please feel free to leave any comments or questions that you might have throughout the session today. I'll be monitoring chat as we go, and I'll pull things in real time for conversation as things come up. I intend to do a high-level overview of some considerations and some key factors to think about when using digital health data in your research. I want to do this talk for about 20 minutes or so and leave plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. But as I said, please feel free to ask questions throughout. And to introduce myself and give a little bit of context as to who I am and why I'm here talking about this particular topic with you. I'm Susan Moore. I'm the core director for the mHealth and Informatics core at Accords. I'm also the associate director of the mHealth Impact Lab in the Colorado School of Public Health, where I'm a research assistant professor. And I'm the research program director for innovation, working with CU Innovations on the Anschutz Medical Campus and the Care Innovation Center at UC Health. So as you can probably gather from all of that, I do a lot with digital health research in a practical context on a daily basis. So I'm excited that you're all here to go over this with me. So the three objectives that we have for this session today are at a high level. We're going to identify some types and sources of non-EHR digital health data. As everyone knows, there's so much information in the electronic health record, but there's a lot of information from sources other than that as well that you can engage in your research, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Some of those alternatives or some of those sources that augment that kind of information to complement it and give you a complete picture. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get access to those kinds of data and some of the security considerations that are involved with working with digital health data. Some of them are more complicated than people generally realize at first. So we're going to go through that a little bit at a high level. And then we're going to review the key issues and challenges that come up over and over again when people are working with digital health data, because there are some hidden surprises that people run into all the time. And the more prepared people can be going into a project, the better. So when I'm talking about digital health, let's orient to what exactly it is that I'm talking about. There are a variety of definitions for digital health that are currently out there in the world. Some are better adopted than others. The last time that I checked to see how many different definitions there were, I came up with 15. Out of that, the top three are the NIH definition, the HIMSS definition, and the definition used by the FDA, which is the one that I'm going to focus in on here today. And as you can see on the screen, digital health includes categories such as mobile health, health information technology, wearable devices, telehealth, telemedicine, and personalized medicine. That's a lot. That is an incredibly large net to cast. And basically, you could say digital health includes anything that has technology touching it in any way, and probably also be accurate. But when we're thinking about it, we're going to think about it, in the particular context of healthcare or health services, health promotion, disease prevention, in association with some form of technological support, access, or use. Different sources of digital health data that we're going to be talking about today fall into four large categories. We'll be talking about mobile applications. We'll be talking about data that you can get from wearable devices, data that you can get from the environment around you, and finally, we'll be talking a little bit about social media. In starting with mobile applications, and starting as we think about these mobile apps and we think about this type of digital health data. Anyway, one of the questions that I generally get is, why does it matter? Do we actually really care? Is it important enough to be trying to figure out how to get access to data of this type, for example, off of a smartphone? The short answer to that question is yes, absolutely. Looking just at this one aspect, mobile applications for digital health data. Here in the United States, 85% of Americans are using a smartphone. That's not just any mobile phone or device. That's specifically using a smartphone with mobile applications available on it. When we look at that in a more global context, 3.5 billion people worldwide are using smartphones right now. That's out of the 4.8 billion people who have some sort of mobile phone access, but that's 73% of the people in the world today are using smartphones. It absolutely does matter. 75% of patients have reported as of 2018 in a survey, a consumer preferences survey done by Accenture, that they use technology for some sort of health management, whether it be information tracking or other types of data collection. They rely on technology for health purposes. 75% of patients is a lot of patients. So really, and admitting my own bias, but really everyone should be factoring digital health into research because it is fairly ubiquitous and becoming even more so. So when we're thinking about in the context of mobile applications, there are generally two large types that you run into. The picture that I have here on the screen is of an iPhone. So this is the iOS platform. And there's also the other predominant platform is Android. So those are the more Google-based phones for those of you who use those. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is because for applications dedicated specifically to mobile health, to health purposes, nothing else, as of the first quarter of this year, there were 53,054 available for download on Google Play and 53,979 mobile health apps available on in the Apple Store. That's a lot of applications that are out there that are available for use. Unfortunately, there's a wide variation in the quality of those applications. There is currently not a single standard way of reviewing or determining what is a good or a trustable app. Some are clinically validated, some are not. Some have an evidence base, many do not. Some are regulated by the FDA and a lot aren't. Depending on the type of application or the interaction that you're having with it. For example, if the mobile app is focused on wellness purposes, decision support, but not providing medical advice, if it's focused on sleep quality, the FDA is not looking at these to see if they actually do what the claims associate, that they're not under FDA authority. If it is an application that does provide an interventional medical service of some sort, it does fall under the list that the FDA is interested in. So probably the easiest way to determine if you're interested in using a mobile application for research purposes, if it's something that the FDA has oversight over, is to go to their website. And the Digital Health FDA website has a quick checklist and a quiz that you can go through step by step, and they will tell you if they actually have authority over the solution in question. It's a very good idea to keep a close eye on what's going, because the regulations in this part of the field are changing very rapidly. For example, with the FDA, during the last year during the pandemic, they announced that they declined to exercise their authority over applications that addressed categories of mental and behavioral health. So solutions that were focused on depression and anxiety. The FDA said, go for it, we're no longer going to review this because the need was so great. They're revisiting that right now, so that's actively in change and actively in development. So it's essential when you're using digital health data and digital health solutions in your research to keep a close finger on the pulse of what's going on. Wearable devices is another large source of digital health data. So when I mention wearable devices, and most people are thinking fitness trackers and smartwatches, like a Fitbit, which is the first set of images here on the screen, or the Apple smartwatch, or the Apple Watch, for example, which is the one on the right of the screen. There are many more solutions like that. In the middle of the bottom row of these images here is a device called the BioSticker, manufactured by BioIntelliSense Inc. And that's a biometric sensor that you adhere to your body literally like a sticker, and it tracks information for you. On the right is a ring that you wear on your finger. This is the Oura ring. And these devices can detect information about your sleep quality, about your heart rate variability as a measure of latent stress, basically, respiratory rate, physical activity levels, and oxygen saturation, temperature, and several other things. In addition to that, in addition to these more commonly biometric and data entered wearable devices with a built-in sensing, there are single-use or more unique ones out there in the market. So smart blood pressure cuffs that feed blood pressures back to a central source for tracking, continuous glucose monitors that are app-enabled and app-controlled. Smart pills, smart medication that have little chip sensors built inside the pill itself that can detect being digested so that it pings that you've actually taken your medication when you have. I have a picture here on the screen of a contact lens. This was created in Korea just a couple of years ago. And this is a smart contact lens with sensors in it that detect blood sugar levels from tears and can help diagnose diabetes right there in your eye. And there are things like smart buttons that you can attach to shirts that will geo-track you and alert you if you're going near places that put you at risk of some sort of bad behavior. Fast food restaurants are the ones that were being used in the study in question. So a lot of different types of devices and data out there that you can find a solution for almost anything that you're interested in doing. Environmental sensors are another source of digital health data. So here on the screen, I'm showing the Google Nest devices and the Amazon Echo, the Echo Dot and the other Echo systems. There are a variety of other smart home devices that are available on the market as well. These sorts of things can detect ambient noise. Some of them can detect pollution levels. They detect sound. They can detect stress in users based on vocal change, so vocal stress levels. They can track inquiry histories that when you're asking your smart assistant different questions, they can keep track of that as well. And all of that is useful for digital health solutions. They also have a radar enabled capability to track motion within your home or wherever you have these set up. If you aren't feeling nervous about that yet, you maybe probably should be. There's the amount of information that can be detected by things like this is really overwhelming. But from a digital health perspective, it's also very interesting. And then finally, one of the other sources of digital health data is thinking about social media. And I have here on screen just some of the more common ones, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, which is on the rise, and an example of a gamified digital health data through Pokemon Go. These can report things like location, topics, social interaction, health behaviors, health behavior trends, health information and disinformation being transferred around, health communication. Pokemon Go is a particular example, is a gamification of movement. So people who did studies on Pokemon Go data were able to determine the amount of physical activity, frequency, rhythmicity, location of activity for a very, very large population of players. And then sometimes in scanning the data, you'll find unexpected things. The graph on the right-hand side of the screen is by Kate Petrova, as published in the Washington Post. And this was from last fall when consumer reviews being posted on public sites for interaction, like the Yankee Candle Company, were showing a noted drop in positive reviews of scented candles as COVID became more prevalent in the population. And one of the associated symptoms is loss of smell and taste. So as we think about all of these different types of sources and we start thinking about data that we can collect from them, I'm going to touch on a few different high-level areas here of things that you should be considering as you're designing your studies with how to collect this information off of all of these different systems. So the first thing is to think about whether your data collection is going to be active or passive. So we're thinking about data generated by patients, either logged, where that's requiring some level of effort from the user to enter something into a system, a mobile app or a paper log, but in obviously this case, it would be some sort of electronic format, versus passively collected, or it's picked up by the solution from the environment, from the solution itself, from the app, from the context, without asking the user to do anything other than consent to let that data collection happen. So as you're thinking about this in the context of your study, you're going to want to think about, and do you need to ask somebody to do something actively or just ask them to allow access? Burden of interaction, technological availability and literacy, privacy and security, these are all major concerns in the context of this sort of access and use of the data. What I have here on the screen is showing some images from Fitbit across different types. This is a combination of actively entered and passively generated. So if you can see the second picture, we're showing exercise days. You can manually enter that you've done an activity, or it can track you. And you can see in the bottom of the screen there's a little bit of it's tracking the map where this particular individual went. Heart rate data tracked passively, sleep data tracked passively, food data you have to enter and log, but then it breaks it down for you. So a combination of the type of information that's available there. When you're thinking about data collection for digital health purposes, you need to think about whether or not you have the right to access it. And then also you need to think about whether or not it's ethically correct to do it in a certain way. I have a picture here showing a report on a study that was published back in 2014, in which the investigators were using a Facebook newsfeed. They altered the Facebook newsfeed for 700,000 users for 1 week, so that some users saw only positive things in their newsfeed, and some users saw negative things in their newsfeed predominantly, and then looked to see if the posts made by those users reflected a change in mood. Potentially very interesting, except that they did that without telling anybody and negatively influenced the mood and the mental state of 350,000 people over the course of a week. So sometimes you can do a thing and might not want to do the thing. And then finally, as you're thinking about the considerations here, you also need to think about the regulatory aspects. So there are a number of regulatory acts and rules that govern digital health data transmission. HIPAA, I think everyone is fairly familiar with. The CAN-SPAM Act governs text messages sent to phones as well as robocalls, sorts of things, and can prohibit certain types of information being sent and collected. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act regulates safety and effectiveness of medical devices that may be in play with a digital health solution. And the Federal Trade Commission Act regulates false or misleading claims and prohibits deceptive practices, including those relating to data security or what you say your solution can do. So you need to think about all of these things in play when you're designing your solution. There's also much more data than people often think. In addition to what's directly collected, there's a lot of contextual data and metadata in play. So what I'm showing here on the screen is an example of the types of information that are collected from taking a simple picture on your phone. So you can see here that it's not only the picture itself, the image that you look at, but the size of it, width and height, the date it's taken, when it was modified, the software on the device that took the picture, the make, the model, identifying information, scene type, color space. There's a lot of information here that most people don't realize is even there. In addition, there's things like information about the device itself, the platform, software versions, GPS tracking data, accelerometer data, potential integration with other analytics solutions. Google Analytics is a very popular, very common one. Other measures of engagement, so thinking about it from a mobile app context, and number of downloads, number of active users, the time between sessions when somebody's using a solution, the average use time or how long an average session runs, the churn rate, so how many people stop using the solution after they start it, technical performance metrics. All of these things can be part of your research and your analysis, and you should think about them because they are going to have an effect as to how good or how effective something is. Then you also, and as we're talking about digital health data collection, you need to think about how are you getting it out of the system of interest? How do you ensure that it's de-identified, that the private information is removed from it? So you need to think about that at all stages of the process while setting up the accounts and minimum data requests, and then realize it may not be enough. So this study was published in JAMA Open, looking at the NHANES data set, so 14,000 individuals across a couple of data collection aspects who had their data de-identified after being used for physical activity tracking with an accelerometer for a week. They took the data and they had demographic information for the research data set separately, and they ran machine learning algorithms over it to see if it was possible to re-identify it. And what they found out was yes, 95% of the adults in this particular study, they were able to match the physical activity data to exactly who they were. So In addition to all those things about data collection that we've talked about, there's some things that you should consider when using digital health data in research. So we're going to go over these, just again at a high level. This is an introduction. And what we're going to start is with data elements and definitions. Not all measures are the same in digital health solutions, even when they're called the same thing. One of the best examples of this is in physical activity. So if a solution is measuring physical activity, how is it doing it? Is it measuring it in steps? Is it measuring it in minutes? Or is it measuring it in something else? When you're thinking about physical activity intensity, what exactly does an intensity level mean? What is high intensity activity? What is low intensity activity? And then do those definitions change over time? So as an example, using Fitbit in context, because most people are very familiar with that, in the last iteration of their software release with the Charge 4 and following on devices in the middle of 2020, Fitbit decided that a minute was no longer a minute. They have created something called zone minutes, where you get more minutes of time credited to you for higher intensity activity. So if you spend 1 minute in doing cardio activity, it counts as 2 zone minutes of time. This can be very confusing if you were using minutes as an actual singular measure of time over time, and we're not aware of that until the study changed midway. Other examples of this kind of thing is whether temperatures are measured in degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit, weight in pounds or kilograms, things that are common in other contexts. So when you're thinking about data elements and definitions are also essential when it comes to digital health. Thinking about data quality, when you're thinking about missing data in the context of digital health data, you also have to think about why. Is the data missing because participants didn't log it? Did the device break? Was it not charged? Was it shared with somebody and somebody else had it that day? Is there a technical glitch going on? Is it a use misunderstanding? So an example of that would be participants in a research study recently who had a wrist-based sleep tracker that, with the idea that the study was looking at physical activity, sleep quality being part of that. Well, it turned out that some of the participants couldn't sleep very well with the tracker on because it was flashing a light at them whenever they moved. So they took it off at night, and other participants took it off to charge it at night. And so the sleep quality data was absolutely zero, but not at random. You have to think about also who's the population that's being included and who's missing from it. So if the solution is expensive to use, or if it's only available for iPhone versus Android, if it's only available in English, you're going to be missing very important segments of the population in that context, and you need to think about that in your research design. You also want to think about the frequency of measurement. For example, with heart rate data, how often is the heart rate being checked? Is the solution storing every single measure of heart rate every 15, 20 seconds, every minute? Or is it summarizing it over a period of time, say 1 day, and servicing that? Which do you as a researcher have access to, and which do you actually need or want access to? A lot of times when I'm talking with people about digital health data, the first thing that they tell me is that their solution that they want to use in their research, that they'll just have it integrated into the EHR and use it from there. Don't count on that. Please don't count on that. There are considerations of just programming considerations, interface considerations, how to extract, transfer, and load that data, the burden on the health system, or to put something new in for use, security considerations, and then also considerations from the provider perspective. There's a growing resistance among providers to using more and more digital health data in practice. There's concerns about being expected to monitor too much outside the clinic walls and to be responsible for something that's showing up in patient-generated health data collected at home. It's contributing to increasing burnout among providers. We're starting to see some results there. So you absolutely have to consider a clinical workflow when you're considering your digital health data. Data security. Who has access to the data on the solution? How is it protected? Is it encrypted? If it's encrypted, is it encrypted at all times, from when it's resting on the device or the app in question, all the way to where it's delivered at the endpoint, whatever that endpoint is, whether it's to the provider at the point of care or to the company that's manufactured the solution? Are the back-end servers secure? How are those protected? Do patients or participants understand truly the data that they're sharing or the privacy considerations involved? And then, since I've touched on server information, as we're thinking about that, who owns and controls and manages those servers? Is the infrastructure well supported for that? Are they Amazon servers? Are they Google servers? Are they servers that local company X is built in a back room because they're a startup and you're working with them while they're still on a shoestring? How is the data transmitted to the server? Is it a real-time transmission, or is it stored and batched over when available? Is that process automatic, or does it require some sort of manual synchronization? All of these are questions that affect the data that's going to be available to you for analysis in the context of your study. And then another thing that comes up is questions of data ownership. So data is an asset, and it's a really incredibly valuable asset, especially when it's in the digital health solution field. You can't just assume that asking for information from a company or from a solution manufacturer will yield it. Sometimes there's a cost associated. Sometimes I just say no, but budget that in when you're writing your grants and you're thinking about your study design. Recognize that some companies are really well set up for that kind of request and others are not so much. Fitbit, for example, has an entire division dedicated to providing data for research purposes that's separate from the main operations aspect of the company. Calm, which is an app used very much for mindfulness and mental and behavioral health solution, has a very good reputation for working with researchers. Some of the other smaller solutions may be just as good, but don't have any experience with that. Sometimes that's positive because that means that sometimes with companies like that or manufacturers or developers like that, you have the opportunity to work with them to figure out exactly what and how and why data should be made available. And then you also need to be prepared to engage in data use agreements and data sharing agreements. Not only for the protection of your access to the information, for the protection of the participants and being able to share information back to them. The IRB will ask you for this, but also to ensure that you continue to have that access and it doesn't just disappear into the depths of the digital health company and is never seen again. And then finally, I want to touch on digital health data analysis. I'm not going to spend much time here because this would be absolutely, this would be a talk in and of itself. So we don't have time to go over all of these aspects today. But I do very, very strongly encourage you when you're thinking about digital health data in the context of your study and how that's going to be analyzed, talk to your biostatisticians and data scientists right up front, because the methods for this sort of analytics are not always as traditional or as common as you might be used to. You may be used to working with structured data sets, the sort of thing that you might find in a data warehouse or a model like that. Digital health solutions generate a lot of data. If you think about it, going back to the example of heart rate data, if you're collecting let's say a heart rate every minute, that's a lot of minutes in a day, in a week, in a 3-month period. That's a lot of data points to capture and analyze from one individual. So, and then think about that across the number of individuals in a study. And that's just one example in a fairly well-contained one. The concept of a data lake is more of a repository for structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data all together, including raw data in large volumes to facilitate data science, machine learning, algorithmic analysis. A data swamp is what you get when you're aiming for a data lake, but you don't set up parameters in advance. It's poorly curated. There's no tags or metadata. There's little or no governance. Don't get stuck in the swamp. Talk to your data scientists early and often. The article that I have here on screen was published in Nature's Digital Medicine. Best practices for analyzing large-scale health data from wearables and smartphone apps by Dr. Jennifer Hicks. I highly encourage everyone to read this. It's an open access, so everyone should have access to it. It's a really good overview. I'm going to stop there because we have 5 minutes left. and I did promise to give people a chance to ask questions. I see one comment in regarding data security. Any comments regarding transfer of data from an iPhone via secure HTTP to a server in a locked office? Potentially a very secure approach. It depends a little bit on how that is being transferred. If it's going directly from the iPhone to that server in that office over a cable where the phone is connected to the computer itself, that's certainly very, very secure. If it's going over the air, over a wireless network, or through the iPhone's back end server somewhere and then coming down to the server in the locked office, less secure. So you just want to think about that, what that data flow looks like and how to describe it at each step of the way. Yes, HTTPS should be encrypted natively there, but when you're thinking about that in the context of the transfer, you also want to think about the context of the data at rest on the iPhone itself. So if it were in the context of a mobile application, not all the applications have the data stored on the phone where it's encrypted right there on the phone. So if somebody got access to the physical device or was able to, to read it that way, sometimes the information is just right there and open, and that's a thing to consider in advance. The transfer may be secure, but if the data is not secure on the phone, then you're dealing with device level security. So whether or not the screen is locked, who else has access to it, things like that are something to think about as well. Excellent. There's David Morin has put a link in chat for everyone at boomer.org with data store and upload for HTTPS. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions? I encourage people to unmute themselves as well as if you don't want to type in the chat. Hopefully I haven't overwhelmed people too much. I know that this is a lot of information thrown at you really quickly. I've put here my email and my cell phone I read and respond to text messages. If you have questions or think of anything that you want to discuss later on, I'm always available. I, as you can probably tell, love talking about this sort of thing and happy to do it all day. We have 3 minutes left if anybody has anything else that they want to ask or discuss. All right. Well, I appreciate your time today, and I appreciate you spending the time here to learn a little bit more about digital health data and all the possibilities with it. I truly do think it's something very powerful. So I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope that if there's any questions you have in the future that I can help with, I'd be happy to have a conversation.